Welcome to the Counter and Cancel Culture podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Kapples. We take back America and the rest of the free world with one truth bomb at a time. Tonight's episode, a special one. This is about freedom, and it's not just Cuba's fight, it's America's fight too. Watching the images and hearing the news coming out of Cuba this week is both inspiring but also troubling. Troubling because we know that with any attempts at revolution, there are large risks to human life. However, it is inspiring to see so many Cubans who accept the fact that they may perish as a result of their expression of disobedience for the chance to live as free people. We are talking about the destiny of 11 million freedom-seeking humans who at this moment in time are acting out in faith despite the very real threat that their government poses against them. Looking back at the profound words of former U.S. President John F. Kennedy as he spoke during his inaugural address in 1961, the belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state but from the hand of God. That speaks very loudly to me to this day. We also remember JFK as being the last president to make any attempt to free the people of Cuba from the grips of this communist regime. While that effort, known as the Bay of Pigs, came up short, the ideal that Kennedy stood for remains to this day. This is a very big deal. The reason Cubans are protesting by the thousand are for very basic human needs, such as the need for clean water, the availability of food and medicine. They are also, for the first time in such large numbers, openly protesting their communist government. This despite facing harsh punishments by said government for their open dissent that includes physical beatings, imprisonment, and even the risk of death. So the question becomes, what will the U.S. do? I think we know what JFK or perhaps Ronald Reagan would do, but what about the current administration? In a statement from earlier this week, President Joe Biden had this to say. The United States stands firmly for the people of Cuba as they assert their universal rights. We call on the government of Cuba, to refrain from violence, their attempts to silence the voice of the people of Cuba. That sounds pretty good, right? But wait a minute. His Homeland Security Director, Alejandro Mayorkas, had this to say.
Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Again, I repeat, do not risk your life attempting to enter the United States illegally. You will not come to the United States.
Wait, what? Didn't Joe just say that the United States stands firmly with the people of Cuba? Of course, we know Biden's immigration policy when it comes to the Mexico border, as he ordered a halt to the building of the wall, freely allowing Latin American and Mexican asylum seekers opportunity to take refuge inside the United States. So why the double standard here? Cubans who are now in the fight for their lives are not welcome to seek asylum in the U.S., but the Trump border wall shouldn't be completed as literally millions have passed through our porous southern border into the U.S. with little to no restriction in recent decades. In a recent sit-down with NBC's Lester Holt, Kamala Harris had this to say about the situation.
I'm sure it's why not visit the border? Why not see what Americans are seeing in this crisis?
Well, we are going to the border. We have to deal with what's happening at the border. There's no question about that. That's not a debatable point. But we have to understand that there's a reason people are arriving at our border and ask what is that reason, and then identify the problem so we can fix it.
Personally, I think that's a great idea. Let's identify the problem so we can fix it. Bingo. I've got it. The problem is an oppressive communist dictatorship that is killing its own people. So I don't know which Kamala would identify as the main problem, either communism or the genocide they've created. But in my book, that's a huge problem for the people of Cuba, and the U.S. should, in fact, step in to help fix it. America has literally been fighting in the name of freedom since our own revolution with the British monarchy during the founding of this great country. This wasn't a one-and-done occasion. America's fight for freedom continued for decades before they achieved independence in the late 1700s and early 1800s. The fight for liberty continued through the ravages of a civil war and later fighting against tyranny in World War I and against the axis of evil during World War II. These fights for freedom continued periodically through the 20th century with conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, Libya, Iraq, and Afghanistan twice. In these so-called endless wars, the U.S. was supposed to be fighting for the liberation of people who were supposedly being oppressed by foreign dictators and communistic regimes that stripped people of their basic human rights, all the while enriching themselves. In the great words of JFK, let every nation know whether it wishes us well or ill, we will pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and success of liberty. This is not a time for partisan politics. This is not about you or me. This is not about Republicans or Democrats. This is about our fellow humans who are suffering greatly right now, and they happen to be only 90 miles south of the U.S. border. You can't only allow people who you think will vote for you to enter the United States of America. Now is not the time to turn a blind eye to injustice. In the timeless words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as he sat in his Birmingham jail in 1963, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. America should never grow tired of doing good. Now is not the time to turn our backs on freedom. It's the time to put our political divisions aside and do our part to help save our Cuban allies. It's the right thing to do. God bless, it's the American thing to do. As the Apostle Paul writes in his letter to the Galatians, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Amen to that. For more on Cuba's fight for freedom, be sure to check out our latest blog on capelweather.com. As always, thank you for joining us during the Countering Cancel Culture podcast as we take back America and also the free world with one truth bomb at a time. Tonight's episode has been a special one, number 11 in the series. It's about freedom, and Cuba's fight is also America's. Keep that in mind. God bless, my friends. Keep the faith, and we'll talk soon.